Hi, I'm Latasha, and I'm here with Pam, my sister in Christ. Also work together at Finding the More Ministry, and you're our treasurer at Finding the More Ministry. And today we're going to take a deeper look at our moving forward topic that we had earlier this month on infertility, a desire of a mom's heart. And that was our topic earlier that Amanda and I kind of spoke with. And, you know, I know today your story's a little bit similar, but a lot different. You know, and we're really just going to share with listeners about how you kind of moved forward with God through that. But I think before we get started, let's share a little bit about yourself with our listeners so they can kind of know who Pam is a little more.
Okay. Hi. As you said, I do work with Finding the More Ministries, and that was definitely a moving forward moment, and really enjoy that. But to go into what we're discussing today, I can think back when I was a child, around 6 or 7, and praying to the Lord to leave a baby on my doorstep. and that sounds so funny, but the Lord brought that back to my remembrance when I started going through this, and it was like, this is something that's been with me a long time. So that, I think, sort of started my journey. That the one thing I always knew, you know, in high school, kids are talking about, you know, what do you want to do in your life? And it was like, for me, it was always, I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be married, not have children out of wedlock. I wanted to be married, and I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be a mom.
So that desire was there very early in life.
Very early.
Okay. So before we kind of get into your story, share with us a little bit about your walk with Christ. Okay. Kind of what that looked like that brought you to today. Okay.
I remember first going to church with neighbors, and they took me to church. I remember going to Sunday school, and it was a Pentecostal church, so I got exposed to Christ in a very lively manner. He was very real. But I remember going to church with them, going to vacation Bible school in the neighborhood with the neighborhood kids, but going to this church, I can remember probably, I would say anywhere from 7 to 9, accepting Christ as my Savior. And I knew what that meant. I felt that pull from Him and accepted Him. So I went to church with them. We moved. So before we moved, Mom and I started going to a Baptist church. And we were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday night visitation in the community, Wednesday night. So we were very, very involved in church. And then, as sometimes happens, the church fell apart. And it probably fell apart when I was probably approaching 13, 14, maybe even 15. And Mom looked for other churches, and I don't know if she just got disheartened because she didn't find the what she was looking for, what she had before. Right. She wasn't finding that family in the church. So we didn't find another church, and we stopped going. And that was a time that I probably needed God most.
Absolutely.
I needed Him most. Because as you go through those teenage years and you start driving, and you're exposed to so much more. And life takes you in places that you don't need to be. Right. But you end up there. So I was away from Him. I did go to church. Dad went to church, and we would go to him on like holidays. So I did have that exposure. I never denied Him. I never said that He doesn't exist. He was my God. Right. I just sort of put Him on a shelf and said, I'll call you when I need you. You know, I'll be back. I'll call you when I need you. And unfortunately, a lot of us do that. And this happened for about 18 years. Okay. I was out of the church.
Yeah. And it's hard when you have that foundation and you go away and you think about, like, how do I get back?
How do you get back?
You know,
sometimes you don't even think about
Right.
getting back.
Right.
You know, you're just living life, and you know he's there, but you know you're not going to church and
Right.
doing what he.
You
what
don't
he
have
would
that
really like.
relationship.
You don't have that relationship, but life goes on and time passes fast.
And I think that's kind of where your story starts.
Right.
You know, so now's the hard part of the story.
Right.
You know, and I want to say thank you for being willing to share your story, because I know it is going to touch and bless others. And God has a purpose
He does.
for that story.
And thank you for letting me share it, because it's been something so close to me that sharing it is really freeing, because
Yeah.
I can share it, he can use it, and I'm
Absolutely.
not alone in this story.
So I think your first mark is just the trying to get pregnant.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what that journey looked like
Right.
for you.
Well, infertility doesn't really start until you've tried to conceive for a year. So the doctor will let you be for a year, and if it doesn't happen, then you go through all these tests. We went through the test. I did have a medical issue when I was 18. So I had exploratory surgery then. I had an issue of blood for a year, and we could not figure out what was going on. So the decision was made to do exploratory surgery. And I can remember being very concerned about that exploratory surgery, because not knowing what it was, my biggest fear was a hysterectomy. So we had the surgery. I remember waking up in recovery, and the only thing that I wanted to know, are my babies okay?
Right.
They said, yes, your babies are okay. I was out. So I recovered from that. Everything was good, but it left me with a right fallopian tube that's totally blocked. But even going through the infertility test, going to a specialist, and I mean a world-renowned specialist, he looked at all my paperwork and everything and said, there's no reason. There's no reason at all why you shouldn't be pregnant. Just keep doing what you're doing. And that's all I can tell you, unless you want to do in vitro.
Right.
And in vitro was very expensive, and I didn't felt moved toward that. So I should have been able to get pregnant at least every other month with my fallopian tube. So.
Okay. So you had the excitement of a positive test.
Finally,
Right.
after 4 years of waiting, took the test, and note that I took many tests prior to that, but it was positive. We were so excited. Mom and I, we went shopping, and I wanted a maternity dress. You know, it was like, oh my goodness, and it was just, I had waited for this so long that it was so exciting to go and to purchase something. And we bought the dress, and Easter was that Sunday, so I wore the dress to church on that Easter, and it was an exciting time.
And then unfortunately, you know, I think that excitement led to the start of a miscarriage.
It did.
You know, so quickly your excitement and kind of came down, and kind of what did that look like for you?
It was, I started spotting, which is not uncommon in a pregnancy. And I called the doctor, and I was told that. But unfortunately for me, it continued on, and I did miscarry. And that rocked me to my knees.
Right after so long of wanting it, like you said, from such a early age as a child, and then waiting for so long to get pregnant, and okay, it happened, and you know, now it's taken from you.
Right, and two, it was a matter of, I thought my problem was getting pregnant. Miscarriage never entered my mind.
So you felt when you had that positive, okay, we've overcame the hurdle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is going to happen. I'm going to be that mom.
Yep.
And so the miscarriage was devastating. It was devastating. And not only is it devastating, but you have to keep going back to the doctor. And I will say that it was a blessing because I did miscarry early. I know other women do carry their babies further, some even to term, and things go wrong. So I did see it as his mercy after many paths later. I found that it was his mercy that it did that. But when you have a miscarriage that early, you have to go back to the doctor and you have to take blood tests, and they're checking your HCG level. And I not only had to go once, but I had to go back maybe 2 or 3 times until it went back to 0. And that just determined whether or not they would need to do further procedures to make sure everything was taken care of in the body. So that was hard because unfortunately when you go to your gynecologist, your obstetrician, you're in a room with other women who are pregnant. Some women have had children, so you've got babies with them going in for their follow-up visits. It's a very, very happy place, but for some it's a torture chamber to have
know
to go
that
back
they
in
have
there.
what you wanted and now no longer have. And
it's not going to happen. So,
and I think you shared with me, after that first miscarriage, you had a feeling of guilt.
Oh yes, I was away from God for 18 years, so it was like, okay, God, this is my punishment. This is my punishment. I didn't serve you, so you're getting my attention, and this is what I have to pay it with, But at the same time, it was my way back to Him.
It was that you knew you needed something from Him to help with this.
Well, He's the creator of life. He gives us these children. That's a gift from Him, and I had to go back to Him because the doctors couldn't give it to me. It wasn't happening naturally for me, so I had to get on my knees. I had to go back to Him. But in this, at work, a wonderful godly lady, Miss Yvonne Woods, we talked about Jesus. She loved Jesus, and she started a Bible study at work on our lunch hour 1 day a week. We would go, and this church was awesome. They opened up their church and let us go in, and we'd go grab our lunch and meet there and praise and worship, and that was just an awesome introduction back into God. Not only the mentorship, but getting it back into the Word and praying and going on. And I started, watching Christian TV, started reading my Bible, and got serious with God. Got on my knees. So I like to see my first miscarriage as I found grace.
And looking back, it's always easier to look back, and you can see that kind of He saw you by placing that lady in your life. He knew that you were going to need her and those type of things. So I think it's always good to look back and be like, okay, God, you did see me at that moment. Even though I may not have felt like it in that moment, but I can see that now, looking back on that. So, and then I think you had a second positive.
I did.
A couple years later, right?
3 years.
3 years later.
3 years later, I'm 35, so high risk. So when I go in, they do take blood since I had the miscarriage the first time. So I'm thinking, I'm doing, and two, by this time I'm back in church. So I'm following Him, I'm serving Him, and I'm thinking, okay, God, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do now. So when I see this positive test, it's like, this is it.
We're good.
We're good. We're good. We're good. And so I take the blood test and go home, and I'm excited, and everyone's excited for me, and I can't wait because I just got to share this with everybody. And spotting starts again. So it's like, okay, here we go. And I miscarry, and I get the call from the doctor's office the next day that my count's low, which means that it's most likely not viable. And to be honest, I was very angry because you're a day late.
Yeah.
This has already happened.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm floored. But I had faith. I knew that I had miscarried, but I knew that God was faithful. I knew He was a big God.
Amen.
I knew that somehow, some way, if I believed, this would be okay. And I have a friend who was pregnant at one time with twins, and she lost one of them. But she was still pregnant with the other one. And I thought, this could be happening, you know? So, needless to say, it was a very, very, very hard time. It was a very hard time, not only for me, but it was a hard time for my family, my friends, my coworkers, my employer. They were very, very concerned about my mental state. Right. I'm sure there were some that was ready for me to go seek medical help, but they let me be, which was good, because this was something I had to go through. But it was hard.
Kind of you and God had to kind of work through that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was the one kind of to pull you along with that.
Well, the Bible teaches you, you know, you have to have faith. You have to walk out in your faith.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing. I was having that faith. I was believing. And but Jesus saw me.
Yeah, and I think he had another situation where he sent you somebody else.
Sent me someone else.
You know,
my uncle, they lived in another state, and they were going to Florida. His wife's sister was dealing with brain cancer, and they were going to see her probably, and it was for the last time. And my uncle was dealing with dementia from cirrhosis of the liver, and he had become very, they were in church, and they said that when they had the altar call, he would pull people down to the altar and bless him. He probably too didn't always remember that he had already been there.
Right.
So he was very spiritual at that time, is where I'm leading to. So when they got to Florida, they told me later that they had a prayer fest, really. My uncle and her sister. And I'm thinking, you know, why wouldn't you when you're getting ready to pass on to the next stage of your life? I would be talking to the Lord. Yeah. And I'm sure He's talking to them in preparation. So they call and they're like, we're coming back home, but it's a long trip from state to state. We'd like to stop and see the family. And I'm like, sure, we'd welcome you to come here. And so they get to the house, and there's other people there waiting to see them, and my uncle comes through the door, and he looks at me. He doesn't say anything to me, but your daughter's in heaven. Wow. Right. I'm like, oh my goodness. He didn't know that I had suffered a miscarriage. Didn't know that I was having this strong faith, that everybody thought I was crazy and had lost my mind. But He was the one God sent.
Right. Again, He sent somebody else to tell I see you. I see you in this.
It's okay.
Yep. Keep having that faith.
I've got her.
Yeah.
You know, you can move on. But needless to say, you know, what my mind knew, my heart wasn't ready to accept.
It takes a while for that heart
to let
catch
go,
up and
let go. But it did, and I did let go of it, and we moved forward. But that was a very, very hard time. But I like to think with my second miscarriage, I look at that as that's where I learned about faith.
Right.
Whether it works out the way you plan it to or it doesn't.
Well, and I think that comes into your last miscarriage of, you know, when you were pregnant and heard a message from a preacher?
Oh, yes. That was shocking because I thought at first it was going to be really good. And
sometimes you're like, this didn't go how I wanted that message to go. But I think God was preparing you.
He did prepare me.
Share with us what that message was and how that spoke to your heart.
Okay. 3 years later, I take the test, got the positive test. I start spotting again, but I hadn't miscarriaged at this point. And went to church on Wednesday night. They had a satellite church, and they were having revival. So we just pick up and we go to the satellite church for this revival. The church is packed, and we go in. The preacher's already preaching, and we sit there, and he's talking about when you really are looking to God for something, and you pray about it, and it doesn't happen. Will you love Him? Will you trust Him? Well, again, right there, that's powerful, and it's like, God, you're speaking to me. What's going to unfold here?
What's coming from this?
What's coming from this? And He says, okay, so you pray about it again, you ask Him again, it doesn't happen. Will you love Him? Will you trust Him? Like, who? You can just imagine.
Right. Well, I got
yeah.
Right now I got chills.
You can imagine what I'm feeling sitting in this pew listening to this. And He says, and there's a third time that you pray about it and you ask for it. And I'm all excited.
You're like, yes.
Thinking, yes. Third time's a charm. That's what we've always heard. Not biblical, but that's what we've always heard. And I'm like, amen. And it doesn't happen. Will you love Him? Will you trust Him? Oh,
I can't imagine your heart at that moment.
I mean,
knowing
it's like my heart's in my toes.
Right.
It's like I think I left it on the pew when I left there that night. And like I said, I'm spotting, so I took that the Lord was preparing
you for what was coming.
For what was coming.
Yeah.
And it happened.
Yeah.
So like, I do love you. I will trust you. So we go back through the blood test, and I go back to the doctor, and they check, and there's no heartbeat. And it was very interesting because God sent me another person.
Right.
I walk out, and you can imagine I'm in tears, knowing that it's going to happen and experiencing it.
You knew what was coming.
Yeah, you knew what was coming.
You've been through this.
I'd been through that. But when the door shuts and you know it's not going to happen, I walk out, I'm in tears, and this woman's at the end of the hall waiting to see a doctor. And she comes walking toward me. And at that time I had a necklace with a cross on it. And she said, "Are you a believer?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." She said, "Can I pray with you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, you can." And she prayed with me. And that was God putting His arms around me and loved me through that. And it's like, okay.
He saw you.
He saw me.
And I think it's important, when God prompts us like that. Like, she was a blessing to you.
Exactly.
That day, and had she not followed that and left, you may not have had that feeling of like, okay, God, I see you. You've got me.
Right. And I don't even know this woman's name. I didn't even ask it that day. That was not important.
No.
What was important was that God needed to minister to me. Yeah. And He did.
Right. And He finds ways to do that.
And He does. And like you said, I think it's so important when we experience that, that we understand how important it is that when we're prompted, that we do it. Because someone needs you.
He's using you.
He's using you
to show other people.
To touch somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I know a number that you shared with me, and it really stood out when I read your story, and it was 264 months
Right.
of disappointment.
Right.
Because it's not a one-time thing; it's month after month. So 264 months.
Right. When you go through infertility, especially when the doctor tells you that there's nothing that's preventing you from getting pregnant, every month you're expecting. And the Bible teaches us to be expecting.
Yep.
So I never gave up hope, but there was 264 months, there were 22 years
Right.
there that I went through this, and it takes a toll.
How did you deal with that disappointment month over month over month?
Well, prayerfully.
Right.
There were many nights. My husband worked third shift, so I think that's where my nighttime with the Lord really started. But there were many times that I just laid. I was on my knees and just cried.
Right.
I mean, there were no words.
Right.
There were no words. He gave me scriptures. He was always with me. Always with me. So.
And you said he kind of collects your tears.
Yes, the Bible tells me he holds my tears.
He's got a lot of tears for you.
He's got some vessels, quite a few vessels. He may have a room full of my tears,
Right.
just like I'm sure with other people they have those as well. But I'm thinking that may be something he shows me, that they weren't wasted, that he
Right.
has them.
Let me pull back the curtain.
Yeah.
And show you the.
Let me show you.
piece.
These are the tears I held for you. But he's also got other things for me in heaven that he's going to show me.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm good with that.
So I know you talked about the people that that God sent to you. And when you shared your story with me, there were other people placed in your life, and you felt that they helped you through this journey. Who are some of those people?
Well, some of those people are definitely my husband, my sister. Had a situation. Mother's Day, you can imagine, is not a day, not a holiday that's dear to me. I have a very hard time with Mother's Day. And one Sunday, a lady was singing in the church, and the song was all about the gift that child brought to her life. It hit me so terribly hard. I had to leave. And this was probably in the last 3 years. And so I got up and I left, and my sister came to me. And we sat in the room next door during the whole service. I missed it. And we just talked. And she comforted me. And my sister's always been there. There's not a Mother's Day that has passed that she hasn't acknowledged it.
Right.
With a card.
Yeah.
And she tells me, you are a mom. Your children are in heaven.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So.
And it's hard, speaking from where I sit, that's one of the things that I never really thought about.
Right.
Until I lost my mom. But then I think about those people that don't have that,
Right.
The children, and I think, Amanda shared that kind of in her story too. Like, that's such a hard day, because people will say, well, Pam, when are you going to have kids?
Right.
And like, it takes ever fiber in you to be like,
yeah.
So I think that's a piece that's kind of came out of this moving forward, is a little bringing some awareness of that, and thinking about those things that people may be suffering with kind of silently.
Well, I answer that, the Lord didn't bless me with children, but I'm good.
And I think he's kind of helped you move, through that. I think you shared you had a couple opportunities for adoption, and that didn't work out, and God kind of gave you peace with that.
He did, and I'd like to talk about that, because a lot of people say, why didn't you adopt? And we were open to adoption. We didn't go out and seek adoption because I was trusting that he was going to give me a child. I didn't feel a strong need to go through adoption, but he did bring two opportunities to us. One was with a cousin of mine, they contacted us and said, she's going to give this baby up for adoption. Would you be interested? And you have to stop and think. I mean, a lot of people would say, yes, you shouldn't even have hesitated, but I couldn't go through an adoption and they change their mind and they take this child away from me.
You knew what that felt like.
Oh, yes, I knew that feeling, and I don't know if I could have made it through that after actually holding one in my hands. Right. So, and two, with it being a family, you don't want the messiness of it. And the last thing you would want is for someone to say, I gave birth to you and I'm really your mama. That's hard too. So there were some things really to consider with that. But by the time we got back and said, we don't care, we're willing to do whatever and adopt the child and give it a home, another family member had stepped up and they wanted the little girl. She was a little girl. And I'm like, I understand. And they said, Pam, she can't have children either. And later I found out that she had to have a hysterectomy. So her opportunity to have her own child had ended. Right. And I thought, makes sense. God worked that out the way it needed to work out. Yep. I'm fine with that. I'm so happy that that woman got that child. And then there was another opportunity, and the baby had Down syndrome. And we were like, we don't care. If the baby needs a home, we're going to take the baby in. Yep. And come to find out, there was a member in the family that already had a child that had Down syndrome. And they thought, wouldn't this be beautiful to adopt this child and raise it with a child that's like them? Right. And I thought, God, you're awesome. Because he knew where that baby needed to be. Right. He knew how that puzzle needed to fit together. There was a plan. So that made sense to me, and it's like, God, I trust you. So I think through this, you've had kind of an array of emotions, from feeling guilty, just angry. Did you ever kind of pour those emotions out to God about being angry and how that made you feel? Oh, yes. We had several discussions, and I would say to him on more than one occasion, you can change this. You can make all this go away, and I could have a different outcome because you are the giver of life. But he's the taker of life too. Right. But I don't think that he was punishing me now or doing anything wrong. But I will say that, I mentioned the 22 years and I reached menopause. And that was kind of hard because, it almost shut a door on having children. But at the same time, you get the sense of relief. Yeah. There's no more of that monthly There's no hope. More monthly expectation, monthly disappointment. So you go on from there, and it was like, okay, we can do this. But I do remember after my second miscarriage, I had a good friend of mine, Miss Deanna, and she was walking in faith with me. Even if she couldn't believe everything that I could believe, she could be there with me. And I told her, we were in the car one day, and I told her, I said, Abraham and Sarah had to wait 25 years for a child. Right. They were past childbearing age. And he gave them a child. Right. I said, if that's his plan for me, I'm a willing vessel. I know you ladies out there think I'm crazy, and not at this age would you ever even imagine. But if it's his plan for me, he'll get me through it. Absolutely. And I think I would have the joy today that I would have had back then. So. Well, and I think, by you sharing your story, it's always, people always share a story and the happy ending. You didn't get the happy ending, but you're sitting here still saying, God is good, God is faithful, and there's a purpose to it all. He has a plan. And I think that will bring kind of hope, to our finding more family. Definitely. In that situation. So I, again, want to thank you for sharing your story. Oh, you're welcome. I know it's going to bless people.
I know it's not an easy story to share. One last thought with kind of the listeners. What would you say is your final moving forward moment with peace with this situation?
I would like to say what gave me peace more than anything was the fact that through my infertility, I found Jesus.
Amen.
He loves me more than I can comprehend what love means. He loves me. He was with me, is with me every step I take. Every tear I cry, everything that happens, He collects my tears, He wipes my tears, we get up and we go on.
Right.
I trust Him. I trust Him. That's something that has to mature. I believe that He's going to use this journey. He has used this journey.
Absolutely.
He is using this journey for me. God has a plan for all of us. We're going to question along the way.
Yeah.
Am I doing things right? Did I miss something? He's very good at when we veer off track to get us back on track. He's faithful, thank God. But he's wonderful. But he likes to minister to me through music. And I know when I dealt with my second miscarriage, Anchor Holds, that was a beautiful song. I love that song. And that was written by a man whose wife had a miscarriage. The anchor does hold. It does hold. But lately, the Lord's brought me the Jeremy Camp Story's Not Over CD. I love it. I love it. It's a bunch of praise and worship in there. It's upbeat. It's wonderful. And he has a song in there, Out of My Hands. And in the song, there's a line in there that trusting in you is a treasure.
Wow, that's really good.
And it is.
Yeah.
It's a treasure, because even going through trials and tribulations today, I know right now we're dealing with COVID-19, we're dealing with a lot of things going on, but I haven't been nervous or scared really, because my trust is in Jesus. And I'm okay. I'm going to be okay regardless of what my future holds.
Right. He carries us through all of those trials.
Right.
For a purpose.
For a purpose. And it is true, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And it is a maturity. It is a walk. It's a relationship like none other. None other. I'm not telling you that my pain has totally gone away, as today you've seen tears. I mean, this is a companion that has been with me for many, many years, and the devil definitely likes to use it. But it's an emotion that is raw.
Yeah.
And one thing that I would like to say is that I found myself not too long ago when preachers would talk about Jesus will never let you down. He will never disappoint you. And I found myself sitting there after all this maturity. He did let me down. He did disappoint me. And I thought, whew, this is not right thinking. I shouldn't, as a Christian, I shouldn't think this way. I know better. Didn't take that feeling away. It was there.
Right.
So I found myself praying to him one night, and it just rolls out. You did disappoint me. You did let me down. And I thought, what? What are you saying? You can't say this to God. I mean, remember in Job when when he finally gets tired of hearing all their whining and complaining and wondering why this happened, he finally tells them, I don't answer to you guys.
Right.
I am God. You weren't there when I created all this. You don't know my plan. So I quickly, after those words came out of my mouth, praised him for who he was, acknowledged him as the creator, that he didn't need my permission to do anything, and that we were good. But I found in releasing that to him that he drenched me in his love. And it was like there was a wall there between us, that I really was holding something back. And I was mad at him.
Right. And you had to let him know that.
And I had to admit it to myself and to him. I had to say it. And I believe with all my heart that he knew this. I don't know how long he knew it, but he knew it. And he knew that for us to go forward and to give me some closure with this.
So you had to release that.
I had to release it to him. I mean, he wants everything. He wants your good, your bad, your ugly. And I found such comfort in being able to just let go of that. Because it's out in the open now, and the devil can't use it against me.
And I think you sharing that will be a huge encouragement to people, that it's okay just to lay it all out on the table. And I think that will help them kind of move forward. You know, which is kind of what this is all about, is how do we move forward from these things. So again, thank you for sharing your story today. We'd love to hear from you at Finding the More Family. You can visit us on our website, findingthemore.org, and that will connect you to all of our social platforms. So God bless.
Thank you.